we'll get stressed out, and then we'll not be, our attitude to our work and everything goes down. Everything becomes a grind, you know, so it's not good.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much. I'd like to open the, you know, the opportunity for the audience to ask questions. I can see so many hands up, and I'm excited. Let's start with the gentleman in front.
Thank you very much. My name is Alan Nwanga, and I sell beer. I'd like to ask the CEOs, how does it feel when competition or benchmark is using unconventional means to get ahead? This is taking you back to the issue of corruption. It's not really you who's being corrupted or doing the corruption, but the person who you sort of relate to in your business is, you know, obviously tipping somebody and getting the favors. And at the end of the day, this is your measure. How does it feel to you, and how do you go about it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caleb, and thank you to the panelists. Mine is, we've had often time that human beings use 40% of their brain's capacity. Those ones who are doing well are always assumed to be using 40%, which kind of rhymes with what Lamin mentioned earlier on, that capacity for personal development is infinite. Of course, as a CEO, you have broadly 3 areas that you always have to deal with. Operations, of course, people management, caring for the people you mentioned, and always looking out for new things, innovations. How do you, while doing those 3 things, ensure that you continue to explore and increase on your capacity as a CEO, reading, you know, doing what? I would like to understand what exactly you do to ensure that you move that extra mile to increase on, you know, the personal development that was mentioned. To Dr. Ian, you mentioned the issue of attention to detail, which I think is a very good thing. Once you know the details, you are in control. As you mentioned, you have your hand on the wheel, which is very good. But again, a number of times people have mentioned that if you are at the top, you are at the summit, details are probably for the lieutenants, your manager. You know, if somebody wants to know about what happens, you know, in an operation, they would always want to refer to a manager. How do you balance those 2 paradigms without running a risk of being called a micromanager by paying attention to details? Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. My question goes to both panelists. Emily from Standard Chartered. What makes you look forward to going to work every day?
What makes you look forward to going to work every day? Well, let's take these 3 questions. Then we'll have another round of 3. And we still have some spare time to spend. Then we'll take more questions as we go along. So over to you, Lamin.
All right, thank you very much. I think the first question was from Alan. It's about what do you do if competition is using unconventional means to succeed? And, you know, you now are faced with a dilemma. Do you follow the same practice so that you can also succeed, or do you stick to your principles and maybe the competition wins? It's a real dilemma. It's never easy, but I think this is where a value system comes in. You have to have a value system for yourself and for the organization. I can definitely tell you that for Standard Chartered Bank, for us, as I said, it's not an issue simply because we defined it right from the beginning. We know it will happen. We know those kind of temptations, those kind of challenges will be there. So right from the outset, if you are a relationship manager, for instance, or if you are a direct sales agent and you need to win business, but in winning that business, you have to compromise, you have to, you know, do something that is underhand. When it comes to our attention, it's very clear, it's dismissal. We don't look at the revenue that you've brought in. The way you brought it in means you have violated those values and therefore you leave the bank. So I think it's a challenge. Although I would say that organizations that depend on that kind of system, in the long run, I don't think they also succeed. They may succeed in the short run, but in the long run, I think it catches up with you. The other thing, of course, is once everybody knows that these are your values, these are your principles, they also respect you for it. So for instance, as a bank, people know that we won't pay bribes or we won't do anything. So they just come to accept it. So when it comes to anything, you know that if it is Standard Chartered, this is the way we do business. So I think you should strive to get your organization to be at that level. Fabian's question was really about what do you do as a CEO in terms of addressing all those core competencies, operations, people management, innovation. I mean, how do you continue to excel in all of those things? You've mentioned one of them actually, reading. I think it's important that you continue to read in your field. You know, somebody made a statement, he said, show me a leader and I will show you a reader. I haven't seen any leader that doesn't read widely. So I think reading widely is very important. There are so many things that are happening in banking, for instance, in other fields. I think keeping yourself current and up to date is clearly very, very important. For me also, I think, I like doing what is called MBWA, Management by Walking About. I think it's important that in your organization you have a pulse of what is happening, and you can't do that sitting behind a desk. So you need to be out there in the field, in the branches, talking to staff, talking to clients, talking to other stakeholders, and getting a feel for what is happening. I think that's very important in terms of keeping you on the edge. And basically be a good listener. I think we can learn a lot if we listen, and I think some of us don't listen very well. We just, it's not an active listening where you try to learn something and then, improve yourself. We always have fixed opinions and we don't hear what the other person is saying. So I think if we do that, I think it will definitely help us in the personal development journey to addressing all those areas that you mentioned. Emily, you had to ask the tough question. What makes you look forward to going to work every day? I think as a leader, it goes back to what I said about vision. What really do you want to achieve? For me, for instance, for the bank, it's really to get a bank that is doing very well, where people are having a fulfilling career, where we are making a difference to the community that we operate in. It's those really, those changes that you bring about that really make a difference. To me, that is really what keeps me going. It's very, very heartening when you see, for instance, our Seeing is Believing program, which maybe I can just mention to some of the members of the audience. We scale up our intervention for curing preventable blindness. Whereas in 2003, 2004, we were doing about 50, 60 operations a year. Last year, we did 5,000 operations. In other words, 5,000 people had their sight restored in Uganda. Now, the organization that really cares for that, that can really mobilize partners to achieve that kind of thing, that's very satisfying. So I think that's what keeps me going. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Lamin has answered those all very well. I probably don't need to answer it.
All right, if you have any comment.
Getting up in the morning, I think it is, one realizes that life is short, and seems to move faster and faster. So I think that, I come back to this thing of, that what we're doing is worthwhile. And, I think we have to, we believe in what we're doing. For me, the thing that maybe gives me a sense of fulfillment often is if I look at, say, maybe a staff member who has, I can think of a few people who've gone through our university, been trained as nurses, we've sent them to India, they've got specialist training, they've worked in ICU, and now there's one girl who's head of a ward. Now I look at those young people and I go, that's great. And so that, that's that kind of thing. So a lot of the satisfaction I get is in people, Then, just want to touch on this thing about the ethical, where you've got unethical competition. I think we face that quite a bit because, what the patient wants is not always the right thing. If you're selling, beer, you can, well, within limits, I was going to say the patient. We don't want your beer drinker to become a patient, actually. Things like ethics, evidence-based medicine, the proper way to treat patients isn't always necessarily what the patient wants, but it's very easy for someone who's unethical to sell them and say, no, you need this, you need this treatment, you need this injection, you need these, and because they're making some money out of it. But I agree with Lamin, you just got to take a long-term view and say, no, even if people misunderstand, we will stick to what is ethical and we'll stick to what is evidence-based and so on. One of the things about brain activity, someone said, from Centenary Bank, you said 40% of the brain is used. I don't know whether I use 40% or 20%, but I know there's a good bit of my brain that's not very good. Because for example, learning language, I find that even though I have the name Busulwa, my ability to learn Luganda is extremely limited now at my stage in life. But I bet it would have been much better if I had learned it in my 20s or something like that. So we do have to accept, that there are limitations. Now, I agree again with Lamin, we must read. There's a very poor reading culture in Uganda. And it's not just about reading in your field. I see people reading textbooks and they go to lectures and stuff like that, but they don't read anything outside of that. For the first time, about 2 weeks ago, I read a novel. I don't usually read novels. I kind of like, the more, that sort of stuff. But I read this novel, and it was like 1,000 pages, and I read it, I was actually on holiday. And I read it in 4 days, and I went, that's, this is just, so any kind of reading, whether it's a novel or whether it's educative or whatever, but I think these things are extremely important for our minds.
Well, thank you very much. I think I saw some hands up before this, and it would be great to give them an opportunity to ask those hot questions. Let's start with the ladies.
Having listened to both speakers this evening, there's one question that I've had in my head that we had in the last CEO forum. Mr. Lamin was a CEO at 30. Dr. Ian has been a jack of all things, but he's still a CEO. Where does luck
Well, if he
fall in
says
here?
he's now a chairman.
Where does luck fall in here?
Thank you very much. My name is Josephine Kimbe from NSSF, and I had a question for Lamin as well. Someone asked a question about the vision. If your board disagreed with you in respect to the vision, I think I want to ask the general question. In case the board does not agree with you on anything that you have presented to them, how have you handled such situations, and can you please give us examples? Thank you.
What do you do when the board says no? All right. So let's take the questions, then we'll go back to any additional questions that may be there. And may I ask may I start by asking, Lamin to comment?
All right, thank you very much. The ladies have asked some very tough questions. Olive, I think, wanted to know, where does luck fall into all of this? I think luck is important. I wouldn't want to downplay luck. But then let's define what luck is. Luck is defined as opportunity meets preparedness. Now, if you are well prepared and the opportunity comes, then you appear to be very lucky. But you could have a situation where an opportunity is there, but you are not prepared, or you are very prepared, but there's no opportunity. So I think luck is important, but as long as we understand what luck is, it's opportunity meets preparedness. The other thing was about how important is a mentor. I think it's very, very important to have a mentor. In the bank, we do have a mentoring program. We have what are called hypos. These are high potential staff. We call them hypos. And all of our hypos, we identify a mentor for them, a senior bank official, who sits down with them from time to time to talk about their career goals, to talk about any challenges that they have, and just to bounce off ideas. So I think it's very important to have a mentor. If you can find one, I think it makes a difference. Now, Jackie wanted to know, when is the time to step aside? Okay, good question. I think if you are doing the same job and you stop adding value, in other words, the law of diminishing returns. I mean, you do a job, initially you add a lot of value, you reach a point where you peak, you plateau, and then you begin a process of decline. I think that is the point when you should step aside. I'm not quite sure I've reached that point yet, but advise me when I reach that point. And then Josephine the question was, in case the board does not agree with you. Yeah, I mean, the board is not supposed to be a rubber stamp. The board is supposed to be independent. They are supposed to be professionals. They are supposed to be people who can look at management's proposals and have an independent view in terms of those proposals. So if the board doesn't agree with you, usually there should be a good reason why they don't agree with you. And I think it's incumbent on management to go back to the drawing board and address the concerns of the board. The board is the ultimate, is the apex body in charge of governance for any institution. And I think one of the challenges that we have is that we don't recognize the role of the board or the importance of the board in terms of governance. At that lecture that we had on Friday, I think Professor Balunywa went into great detail about how important a board is in terms of setting the tone at the top, in terms of making sure that the structures are in place, that management is held to account. So I would say if a board does not agree with management, it's actually a sign that it's a board that is doing its job, that it is questioning management's action, and in the end, it will be best for the organization. Just to give an example, in the banking sector, for instance, the 2008 financial crisis, where you had all of us banks doing very funny things in terms of subprime mortgages and complex derivative products. Where was the board? The board should have been there to question the rationale for some of those products or some of those instruments that were being floated, but the board was silent. And of course, management just went haywire, and the end result was disaster. So I would say that we shouldn't take a board disagreement with management's proposal as necessarily bad, but we should just try and see what's their argument and then how management can respond to that.
Sorry, Lamin, let me just follow through on that. Have you ever had a disagreement with your board, and how did that go?
Here in Uganda, Emily, where is Emily? I don't recall any instance where we've had a violent disagreement at our board level. I think generally the board has guided us in terms of additional areas to look at. Not that necessarily they've disagreed with a proposal. I mean, I wouldn't go into the details of, say, for instance, the strategy session that we had today with the board, but they came up with areas that they felt management should look into sort of in more detail, or areas that, maybe they want us to focus more on. So I think, generally, if you have really planned well, you've, thought out your proposals very well, and you bring them to the board, if it is not a political board, because the other challenge, of course, that you can have is a political board, a board that is not professional, a board that has an agenda different from what is in the institution's own interest. So you go to such board meetings, you have cliques, you have factions, and anything that comes in has to, play within those politics of the board. So if you have those kind of situations, yes, that can be quite a challenge. Luckily for me, I've been in situations where it's been a very professional board. When we bring proposals, they do add value in terms of comments and proposals that they make, but I haven't had a situation where a proposal has been thrown out completely.
All right, thank you very much. Over to Ian.
About luck, and first of all, I'd like to say that it's not, I didn't reach or develop international medical group, just because of luck, or because I didn't have focus or goals. I was very clear right from when I started a small clinic what I wanted to do, but I didn't know a time scale of how long it would take or that kind of thing. And because I was an individual, I wasn't part of a large organization, I didn't know how it would be achieved. But on this thing of luck, and someone said the harder I work, the luckier I get. So I think there is that thing. Someone looks at someone else and says, that person seems to have been very fortunate. But that person themselves knows that they have had to work very hard for where they've got to. And also on that thing of opportunity, if you've read any of Malcolm Gladwell's books, he's pretty good actually. I can't remember which book it is, but he talks about Bill Gates. Bill Gates was in the right place at the right time in the right decade and so on. He was a kid who was exposed to computers and programming early on. He went to a university where he got that more exposure and so on and so forth until he was able to develop, into Microsoft. I would say the same is probably true of Zuckerman and Facebook as well. So some of these guys. So it is, luck in that sense that they were in the right place at the right time. But I think hard work and focus is incredibly important. And I would say, if I look at over the past 15 years of my life, I haven't been very lucky. Really. There's so many obstacles that at one point I got cancer, and I got it at the absolute worst time. So that wasn't very lucky, I think. But it's just one of those things. And often I've been in situations thinking, I'd like to be a lot more lucky. I'd like to have more fortune. It seems to be just a grind to get through things. So I think that hard work, this thing of just looking for the break and so on, I don't think I've really had any of those sort of breaks. About a time to move on. Well, I think I moved on because as CEO, and really it also depends on your placement, because somebody came along who I felt knew what I was doing. There wasn't anyone that, to that point. And then a guy came along who I knew had the capability and so on. So, and I, as I say, I had not other goals, but you build one thing, on the next stage of your life, on the last stage. So there is a time to move on. Boards, I think the problem with some boards, now obviously not Standard Chartered, which is large corporate organization, but there are many boards which are rubber stamps. There are many boards which are not really functional. And I mean, even in my own case, if I own the company and I have a board and I'm the sort of single shareholder and so on, you have to be, you really have to get into the whole corporate governance thing and do a whole learning curve to act as a shareholder. So I think that there is, not every board functions as well as yours does. Thanks.